Welcome back to another episode of Indie Choice Picks. I hope you guys have been pretty cool under this quarantine as if we're going into I don't know, another a month or so, and they're talking about extending it. So I thought I'd be doing a little bit more interviews while I have the time. On today's show, I have the amazing Zach Jesser. He's the creator of Atlas of Men, which is a pretty interesting story. We kind of get into a little bit talks about Marvel and DC and their cosmic playthrough and how they're doing that and how most writers try and do that and just kind of missed the dunk on that. So enjoy this interview, enjoy this episode. If you guys are liking the channel, like and subscribe, of course, and I will bring you guys more creators and more content coming your way. But for now, enjoy this interview with the amazing Zach Jesser and his book, Atlas of Men. You guys enjoy. Hey, Zach, thank you for coming on to the show. Finally got you in front of a camera, my man. Sorry for the mix-up last week. It's been a hell of a time in this quarantine these days.
Yeah.
So, how you been?
Good. You know,
Nice.
just living life.
Yeah, I mean, living it as best as you can during this time. I know that. It's been really hectic. But I know a lot of people have a lot of free time, so now they're spending a lot more time on YouTube, social media. You're just seeing all sorts of crazy stuff. But I know a few people who are actually buckling down and using the free time to actually complete their comic books and stuff like that. So start crowdfunding and stuff like that. So it's actually really, I would say, a blessing in disguise for most content creators like you and me. It gives us more time to kind of go ahead and get that project we've been sitting on finally done and out and into the hands of the readers. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. Zach, go ahead, tell the audience who you are and the name of your book, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Zach Jesser, and I am trying to start my comic book empire with Havoc Comics. So that's HAVC Comics. That stands for Hyperbolic and Veristic Comics. And it's going to be a whole universe of characters, a whole bunch of stories. My original plan was to make a lot of graphic novels, you know, full size stories that, you know, they weren't like single issues that would just end, you know, one little tiny chapter at a time. I was planning on making full books, so that way when you bought the book, you just got the full experience. You didn't have to read, you know, 15 different issues to get the full story. You could just have my book and that was it.
Right.
You know, that way when the next book comes out, you just buy the next book and you didn't even have to read the previous book because they're all just their own thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that now just because it seems on my own, I'm realizing it's taking a really long time to get anything done. And I realize with how this works, you know, you got to keep the hype train moving, and if you don't have any product to sell or anything out, everyone just kind of forgets about you.
Right. Yep. I know the feeling.
Anyway, but my current project is called Atlas of Men, and that is it's going to be a really interesting start. I don't know if everyone's going to like it because it's not what you would normally expect from a comic book.
Right.
Type of thing, you know. I mean, a lot of people, they want either kind of wacky, funny things going on, or they want superheroes, or they want something like that. My universe is bigger than that. It's not just guys in tights fighting. It's not just crazy, wacky moments. It's supposed to be kind of like real life, how superheroes might be if we had the world that's in my head. You know, it's like a very similar world to our world. Everything is very down to earth and contained, but then also when you have these big over the top moments, you have them in context, you know, because in comic books, a lot of the time you'll get these big over the top moments and everything's, you know, a world ending scenario when, you know, not every time is going to be a world ending scenario in real life. I mean, sometimes you just need the guy down the street to get his face bashed in because he keeps doing some shit that you don't like, you know?
Right. Yeah. I concur. I
Yeah.
concur a lot with that because, like, when it comes to trying to write, especially superhero like scenarios, you always get like what you said, that world-ending event, and you're like, well, what can I do to make it different? There isn't really much you can do. You know, you got the cosmic being wants to destroy the world, seen it. Massive alien invasion, seen it. You know, merging of the multiverse for some reason, seen it. So that concept really does get overplayed. I mean, shit, DC and Marvel just keep doing it, and people keep buying it, and it's the same shit over and over again. So it's what
Yeah,
can you do differently as a writer when you're trying to take a very popular genre like superheroism and mold it into a different story? It's like, well, okay, well, that's where the writing and the creativity kind of comes into play there.
yeah, exactly. I've been getting frustrated, and I think that's probably the best thing I could be, writing these comics, because I've been watching how comics in the mainstream, obviously the big two with Marvel and DC, how they keep doing the same thing. It's like, okay, well, we're going to do this big event, and then we're going to have everybody die, and then everybody's going to come back, and it's the same over and over and over.
Right.
And I'm like, can we please just have some normal superhero stuff? Where like I just want to see Iron Man take out some terrorists or something.
Right.
Can we see Batman take down a street thug once or twice in a comic? Like, I don't know. I'm just tired of everything being this huge over the top story arc that only really lasts like a few issues. But it's of course across every single character that they have. So you
Right.
want to get the whole story, you got to buy Flash 1 through 7, and then you got to buy Wonder Woman the same amount, and then Batman 2, and then you have to buy all of those, and so of course you have to have a subscription. So so you don't get the full story if you just I just like Batman. I just want to I just want to read that.
Right.
But you only get like half the story, and then by the end of the whole run, guess what happens? The whole story arc is completely scrapped because it was just let's do a reboot again.
Right. Like Flashpoint again. Like, okay, multiverse is gone, so now everything's like conjoined into like one single Earth or something like that. But I think that's again, that's the challenge when you're dealing with superheroes. I've seen a lot of writers, they go from the mundane, like the everyday superhero stopping crime, thwarting a criminal organization, that kind of shit. And then for some reason, out of nowhere, they start getting cosmic with it. Like, we got to do, and I'm guilty of this too. And I don't know, maybe that's just something that's with me. I like to get cosmic and create cosmic entities. But when you up the stakes like that, with someone as little, let's say Batman, right? Batman's a badass. Don't get me wrong, I love Batman, but we don't know if Batman can take on a cosmic entity and end up winning. He might not. I don't know, but you're not gonna pair Batman up with something godlike. Like, that's not how it works. So now you have to up your game in creating another character who's able to take on this new threat, and you just keep getting higher and higher and higher with the stakes until you're just like, wait, what can I do now? I don't know if I can go bigger than fucking God. That's
Well, yeah, and then you get stuff with like, Batman's my favorite, so I have pretty much all the references I'm probably going to make just off the top of my head are going to be Batman. But they didn't they make Batman a god at one point? Like,
probably. Who knows? In the vast DC multiverse.
Yeah, I saw it at one point. There's some stuff in the multiverse, don't get me wrong, that I think is pretty cool. Like, I like getting alternate stories. So that's a part of the multiverse that I like.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like you can still do that in a way that isn't confusing and isn't it doesn't make you confused about who the main people you should be focusing on.
Right.
Because that's about the thing about the multiverse that I don't like, and that's actually a big part of my comic books, is that I don't want there to be alternate timelines. I don't want multiverses. I don't want these crazy scenarios of like everything's just out of proportion. I want it. There's one timeline. There is no other timeline. You're not going to get a bunch of like, I'm going to go back in time a bunch of and change a bunch of stuff, and then later on, this will
right.
completely get rid of all the stuff that I just did. Everything that I write should have a purpose and isn't going to later be ruined by a different story because I went back in time or something.
Right.
You know?
I like that idea perfectly. But I do kind of like I've written books in the past, like dude, like maybe over 10, maybe 12 years ago. And those books are still floating around out there and people are reading them and liking them. But I've always thought about like, okay, what if I like did a comic book adaptation on those books? Would it be the same as what I've written, or would it be slightly different? And if so, if it's slightly different, what's going to happen in certain scenarios that maybe I thought about putting in those books that I didn't really necessarily get to? So my brain kind of goes into like, okay, alternate story. Oh, let's make this into a separate, entirely different universe kind of deal because I'm going to explore situations and topics in this reboot or adaptation or whatever it may be that I didn't do over here. So automatically you start building that multiverse. And I think that's where DC and Marvel kind of got their things, because you have the Silver Age of comics with Barry Allen Flash, and then you had Jay Garrick's Flash. And then when people thought that Barry Allen was Jay Garrick, like, oh no, he's a different Flash. This is a different universe, but we're going to explore storylines that's relevant to Barry Allen that we would have used for Jay Garrick, but we were like, nah, let's forget about him. We're going to go over here. And you slowly start building up that multiverse, which, by the way, once you start, you can't stop. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's kind of a drug.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with that cosmic stuff too. Like, I mean, even in my stories, I'm starting to get into some of that in my writing, but I'm still trying to come at it from an angle of realism and grounded thoughts. Because I love comic books, but it gets me a little bit that they don't think about how to present it in a way that's going to be somewhat easy to follow and is not so big and crazy that you just kind of go like, why are we going here? Like, why is this, like, we're gonna go all the way to the maximum instead of just being like, okay, here's a better way of doing this that's not going to be so over the top that people are just not going to be interested at all.
Right.
If they're not interested in that kind of thing, because there are people who love the over the top stuff about comics, but people like me really don't. So like, I really enjoy. I would enjoy reading the X-Men more if they didn't do a lot of like interdimensional stuff, because that's a big part of the X-Men. But it wasn't always like that,
Well, that's like I don't know if you watch Supernatural. I mean, that's like one of my favorite shows, and the show, believe it or not, was supposed to end at season 5 after the apocalypse things, and they just fucking kept on going another 10 years later. And I liked how they introduced angels as like these cosmic beings, and they could be killed, they have their limits, but then at the end you kind of find out that Chuck is God. And when you discover that, whoa, that's where the series was supposed to end, you're like, okay, well, Chuck is God, we're just gonna leave that alone. And now you get season 15 where God is the bad guy. And I'm like, wait, back up. Hold up. Did you guys think this through? Because you're talking about God. Now you're going to have to you're going to have to nerf God in order for the Winchesters to actually overcome that. And I'm like, that's the thing about cosmic entities. They're cosmic for a reason, because you can't nerf them. The moment you start dealing with beings who've created the universe and they're ancient and immortal and they're being here for all the time, and then all of a sudden you got to figure out a way to like trap them or kill them, that kind of takes away the concept of them being cosmic, because you got to nerf them, you got to dumb them down in order for the protagonist to actually be able to stand a chance against something of that caliber. And I'm like, you either deal with cosmic or you don't, because nerfing God or any other cosmic entity, that doesn't work for me, because it's like, well, it's God. You can't nerf them. You really can't. So that's where that creativity comes in, and you got to figure out. I would just personally not touch it. If I'm going to create a cosmic being, it's not going to be on par with God. That's just me. They're going to have their limits. They're going to have their abilities and their weaknesses, because most things, if you're not God, has a limit to, their existence and stuff like that. If you write a concept or a mythos surrounding that character, but I stay away from God because that's you can't nerf God. You can
Yeah,
try.
yeah. Especially if you're trying to make him like a main character, uh, it's an interesting concept. I mean, it's like hats off for going there, but uh, as a writer, I look at that and I'm like, okay, I see where you're going. I'm like, I understand you're wanting to go there, and like you got your balls on the table. Okay, I can see there you got big balls. I got it. But uh, then when you start watching it, it's like, okay, so now I have all these questions. Like, how does this God work? Is he the same God as like the biblical God? Because you're trying to make him into that, but he's clearly not the same. He's clearly not as powerful. He's clearly not what you would imagine. So like now we're going into this whole realm of like, our I don't know. It's a really, because there's already so much like mythology around any god. So I mean, especially if you're going with the Judeo-Christian God, I mean that's like, that's a pretty popular god. So a lot of
Right.
people have information on that guy.
You're either going to piss a lot of people off or the other thing. And I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, that's, to me, when you're dealing with cosmic entities of a religious origin, like, Judeo-Christian God, Jesus, and all that stuff, it becomes a really touchy subject. And I think that's why Supernatural never touched on Jesus Christ, because
yeah,
that's a really touchy, like, subject. Like, you can't really do Jesus Christ wrong because you're going to get a huge backlash.
yeah,
But
yeah,
an entity like God, which is not only mentioned in the Judeo-Christian Bible, but I mean, there's different interpretations of that particular, God, the big guy, So
yeah.
there's a ton of, I guess, lore surrounding the guy upstairs, and I guess that's why like they went with that. But I mean, I could see it right now. Like if they brought in Jesus Christ at like season 6, people would have been like,
Yeah.
"Okay, what are you doing?"
Yeah, that'd be. Yeah, it's a little late now. I
Yeah,
think if they would have brought him in a little bit sooner, it might have worked. But yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
So your comic back there, are you doing all of this by hand?
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God! Tell us a
Well,
little bit about that.
as far as the drawing goes, all of the actual artwork, the majority of it is going to be hand done. So like I do all of the penciling, which I actually, funny enough, I do while I'm at work. So I've got 15-minute breaks plus a 30-minute lunch. So I sit down with my pen and paper or my pencil and paper, and I just do what I
That is
can.
that's really good work ethic right there. I mean, because you're probably working from home right now anyway, so that's a
No,
good. Really?
no. Actually, I'm essential
Oh,
because I work in a machine shop. So
okay.
uh, we the components that we make go into medical equipment, so we're sort of essential, but we're kind of like on the back end.
Right.
So I don't know. It's kind of weird to be considered essential when I don't. It doesn't feel like that. I mean, I'm not like on the front lines or anything.
Right.
I'm not doing anything that's actually being used right now.
Well, I mean, hey, be grateful you got that job. I wouldn't question that because there's a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
people trying to figure out
Um,
what to do right now.
yeah, and we actually had a huge layoff because of all this stuff. But yeah, it's rough. Anyway, so I'm actually doing my job, like going to work and then sitting down I'm actually mostly in my car, and then I'll sit and draw for a while. So then when I get the drawing done, so like the pencils, then I put it onto my board that I have in the background. And I actually have a light table.
Oh, cool.
I actually made that myself too.
Nice. I got a little light. I used to do traditional animation before I started going digital. I actually used to draw a lot of hand drawn stuff. I was never a fan of the digital art because I have shaky hands. So
Yeah,
when I draw, I can't draw a straight line to save my life, even on paper. But I was able to kind of manage that. So I like the original feel of pencil on paper.
yeah,
But I realized that drawing digitally saves you a lot of money on supplies. So when I used to animate, I used to have a basic light table, probably like, the size of a regular piece of paper, and it was an LED. And I think, dude, I used so much paper for
Yeah.
just like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds of animation. It was a lot. So
Oh yeah.
when I started going digital, I was like, I should probably get used to drawing digitally because I don't have enough storage space to store frames and panels and stuff like that in my place. So um, I'm still pretty excited that people like you are still doing the traditional thing. Most people are just like kind of threw away the boards and stuff and just went straight digital and just kind of went from there. So me being guilty of that, but I mean that's real skill if you can do that by hand for sure.
Yeah, I enjoy it. There's just something about it that just doesn't about digital that doesn't appeal to me. I've tried it. I've tried doing stuff with it. Maybe if I had a better setup, but that costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, what I did, my wife got me a Huion tablet. That's basically a USB. It plugs right into my computer. And I was using GIMP for a little while, which is a free video editing software, not video, graphic. It's like Photoshop. It's like the
yeah,
little brother of Photoshop. And I was using that for a while, and then they started updating. And then most of my tools that I used to use for my comics never came back. So I kind of got rid of GIMP, and I invested into Clip Studio Paint, which was like, I don't know, maybe $100. And
it's not too bad.
nah, it's actually really good because I've been using it a lot lately. And before I never used it. I was signed up with Adobe and I was using Photoshop because
Yeah,
Photoshop is like GIMP, and I'm like,
yeah,
but I didn't like Photoshop because it was just too.
yeah.
Every time I opened it, it would
It's so
lag.
expensive. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's expensive. It lags. It actually doesn't even have all of the stuff that you need. I mean,
right.
Illustrator is actually better, but it's not user friendly at all.
No,
It's so confusing.
and it was like $30 a month, and I'm like, well, half the
Yeah,
time I don't even use it. So I
yeah.
canceled that. Got Clip Studio Paint one-time payment of like $100, and
Mm,
been watching tutorials. I'm like, this isn't so bad. This is actually really good, and they
yeah,
have a stabilization feature where you can, if you have shaky hands when you draw, it kind of helps you with that and stuff. So
yeah.
kind of work
Mm,
on drawing and stuff like that. So I think total maybe $150, and I can plug it right into my laptop and
mm,
works perfectly fine. Take it wherever I want to go. But I mean, that's just me personally.
yeah. I've got a similar setup. Like I have a little tiny tablet that I work on, and I'll actually use digital to fix some of the mistakes because like I don't I'm not that good. Like, I'm all right. I kind of wish that I wasn't doing all of it. I wish that maybe if I had a pencil artist, things would be a little bit better for me. But um, I really enjoy the inking process, though, especially non digital, like traditional inking. Oh man, I mean, there's nothing that gets my heart racing more than just like sitting there at the page and being like, okay, how do I want to do this? So I actually, for my pencils, most people, they'll try to figure out where they want their inks to go. They basically will do the full inking style, but with pencil, um, just so that when they get down to inking, all they have to do is just trace, and they're good.
Right.
I don't like that. I do basically line drawings that are just bare bones. There's no shadows, no nothing, and then I come in with the ink, and I'm like, it really puts my brain in perspective of like, what is this ink going to do? What is
Hmm.
it going to be? Where are the shadows? What am I looking for? So that way I don't have to worry about shapes anymore. I don't have to think about, you know, perspectives and all that stuff because that's already done with the pencil work. But the inking is like, that's like where the magic happens.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I can't ink. I can ink now, but I'm not like a super professional. Like I've been studying like how to ink for a very long time. And my style kind of borderlines on American comic book making and kind of like the manga style. So I kind of took those two aspects. 'Cause when I started drawing, it was more like Dragon Ball Z figures and Ash Ketchum and stuff like that when I was like in the sixth grade. And then as I grew older, I started drawing more Marvel type, DC type characters, and I took that and merged it together. So my inking isn't for like the traditional comic book artist on the Western side is more of a manga Americanized hybrid of sorts, if you will. If you see some of my
Yeah.
art, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that is a lost art, to be honest. Like, I don't think I know anyone right now who still inks traditionally like that.
Yeah.
You can't. That's insane. I've seen people do it way back when I was getting started, like 12, 13 years ago, and I'm like, wow, I'm afraid I'm gonna tip over the bottle. I can't do that. Because I
That
know
is a
people that
worry.
yeah, they had like the dipping, like the pen, and they dip it, and that's how they ink. They didn't use markers or pens. They had the old school traditional brush, and they stroked it. And I was like, man, I could never. I don't know if I could do that. I won't say never. I'm sure I could learn, but I would say, that's kind of a little bit intense for me.
I have like many, many, many different styles of pens. I spend a lot of money on pens.
Oh yeah, I think I still
got,
have. Hang on.
I got the ink right here. But these are actually really cool. I just got these. This pen is basically an ink. It's an ink brush pen. So
Right.
you fill the little reservoir right here, and then you've got like the regular brush tip. So that's pretty cool.
When I used to do my hand drawn inks, I used to use these microns. These were the ones that I used to use
Yep, I've got
a
a couple
lot.
of those.
Sharpies were my favorite ones, but I spent a lot of money on these microns. I don't even know if there's still any juice in these bad boys, but these worked really well.
Yeah.
I may actually maybe try to do some hand stuff with micron pens, kind of knowing what I know now with digital art. See if I could translate that over into paper art, and I guess we'll see what happens for sure. So,
Yeah.
all right, well, tell us a little bit before we kind of get into the wrap up. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay, so my current project, Atlas of Men, it's the short version of it is there's an amnesic man who wakes up in a pile of bodies, and he has no idea what's going on at all. I mean, he's amnesic, and he stumbles upon this broken world. So it's post-apocalyptic pretty much, but that's not really the focus of the story. It's more just that's just the setting. And he finds out that there's these two factions that are not necessarily at war, but they're definitely not friends. He gets kind of caught in between those two factions and has to figure out what his place is, because you start to realize pretty quickly in the story that he plays a big role in what these two factions are fighting over, and what the main focus of the story is really kind of revolves obviously around him because he's a main character.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, you've been working on this for how long?
Probably about a year.
Hey, time is time. I say take your time. I wouldn't rush, to be honest. I mean, just get it done. And I don't really care how long it takes. As long as the story's good, the art looks great, I'm all for it. Are you planning on doing a crowdfund or anything to kind of get the book into the hands of the readers?
Yeah, I'm thinking, now that I've been on Twitter for a while, I realize that, Indie Comics has kind of a, playbook, I guess, on how to do things the way that'll really get things out there. So now that I've really looked at that, I'm like, okay, well, maybe doing a full comic and, waiting a couple of years before I get that out there, maybe I should just, do it chapter by chapter. So I'm thinking this comic's probably gonna be a few like maybe 6 or more chapters, and each chapter I think I'm gonna do probably like a campaign for it,
Okay.
and then once I do the chapters one at a time, I think maybe at that point then I'll combine them together and make like a trade out of it.
Nice. Okay,
So,
cool. Well,
yeah, almost doing it the traditional way, but the modern traditional way.
yeah. My thing is honestly, as a creator, I really don't care about making money, to be honest. My main
Yeah.
prerogative is giving something to people, like right now. Like people are just out of their minds, stir crazy. They're stuck in their homes. They can't go out. It's good to be getting those, campaigns that you signed up for back in November of last year, finally coming in and people
Yeah.
are like reading and having something to do. If you can do it for free, that's even better. Kind of, you have all this time. So my main prerogative is giving something to people to enjoy, like during times like these, or when you're off work on the weekend, something to kind of take your mind off of what's happening in the world. I mean, the more you give, to be honest, without any intent of return, the more return eventually you're going to have down the line. Like, you got to give it first. So money is in my. It's nice. Don't get me wrong. It's very nice to be able to
Yeah.
make like some money off of your work. But right now, and most creators, they've said this to me, money isn't the main thing right now. My main job is to create content for people to enjoy at any time that they want. Because when you do
Exactly.
that, you end up getting the return a lot later on down the road, whether that be monetary return or just a good feeling that you've made your place in this world with something as probably small as a comic book. That's what really matters, and that's
Yeah.
what really matters as content creators. So take what take it what you will, but we're artists. I mean, that is the hungriest job
Yeah.
most people have. Starving artists. It's not just a little term people toss around. Like, we're hungry, and we're not
No,
hungry for food.
yeah. No, I agree. That's actually exactly how I feel too, and I think that's why I feel so at home in the comic book world. You know, the community that we have with the people around me, like nobody else gets this. Like I'll talk to people at work and they're like, "How do you not care about money?" And I'm just like, "It's just a thing, you know.
Right,
It's not about that. Like life isn't about making money. It's about making something. You know, it's
right.
about coming in and showing people who you are, and then hopefully they like it, and then you can figure out who they are. And you know, I just want to create something that people can relate to, people can talk about, and you know, maybe it can impact somebody's life in a positive way.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know?
And you might inspire a new generation of people who saw your comic book at one point and say, "Oh, that's really cool. I'm going to learn how to do that." And it just keeps on cycling over to where, you're inspiring people. And that's basically, to me, is a little bit more valuable than money, is
Yeah,
being able to inspire kids or someone who's probably the same age as you, if not older, to say, "Wow, that's really neat. How did you do that? I'm thinking about kind of getting into that myself." And that's the whole thing. Comics are for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, who you like, what you do. We could all, and we actually should be all, agreeing that comics are for everyone.
yeah,
Period,
yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
All right. So before we end, I like to ask questions. One question that aspiring artists can kind of take with them to kind of help build their brand or their audience or their comic book, stuff like that. Usually I ask about crowdfunding. What's the number one advice that you would give for crowdfunding? But I've seen you haven't gotten that far yet into the game. What's the one piece of advice you can give aspiring artists to create a comic book?
Start. That's like the one word that I can say. I mean, this is my first comic. Uh, I mean, my first is the first that I'm gonna show to people and actually try to get money for.
Right.
But I have learned more in the amount of time that I've started working on this than I ever learned sitting down and going, okay, what are proportions? How do I do perspective? How do I, make this line look the way I want it to? You will figure that out if you start a comic book. I promise you, if you actually start on this, if you just sit down and go, what's page one, you know, write out a script. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if anyone understands it. If you understand it, if you're the only one writing it and reading it and going off of it, just start. If you start in on it and you take it all the way to the end, maybe just a 10-page comic,
Mm-hmm.
something short, maybe even a 5-page, maybe a 1-page if you're really, really impressive. Um, you will learn so much just from doing the process that it doesn't really matter what you can learn online doing tutorials. You can take classes. Comic books, you just have to do. You just have to try.
I agree, 100%, man. Well, thank you, Zach, for coming on to the show. It was really a pleasure finally meeting you, and I look
Yeah, thanks
forward
for
to
having me.
your comic book, Atlas of Men. From the artwork you sent me on Twitter, it looks really good, and I'm still blown away by the artwork that you did that all by hand. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's something. It's on the page at least.
Now, before we go, are you self-taught or did you
Yeah,
take classes in it?
I didn't take it. I mean, I've taken a few art classes, but I really just like sitting down and working on it instead of trying to learn stuff. I mean, I it's kind of a weird question to ask a lot of the time for me because it's like, did I take classes? I mean, I've learned from people, I've talked to people, I've sat down and actually asked people questions, and they, gave me advice. I mean, I've also just sat and watched videos a lot, like what other people do.
Hmm.
I mean, I've taken like maybe one art class that was like a traditional art class, and I didn't really learn anything from it. Oh, actually, no, I did take another one in college, but that was like more painting and stuff.
Right. I
But
think
yeah,
I've taken one art class, me too, and a lot of people who are comic book artists, we don't take art classes. I think the only art class I took was in high school. The only thing I took from that was 1, 2, and 3 point perspective. That was it. And if you can draw from perspective, you got it made. Because
yeah,
perspective is very, I wouldn't say it's hard. It's very tedious and time consuming, especially if you're trying to draw
yeah,
a city like New
yeah,
York. Like you're gonna be in that chair a very long time. So take your
yeah,
time, turn on some music, have at it. So,
yeah,
all right,
exactly.
Zach. Well, thank you for coming on to the show. I know everyone who's watching, we're all looking forward to your book. When you do finally start your crowdfund, let me know and we can get you back on the show and
For sure.
hope to generate some buzz for you to get people to go ahead and get you going with your comic book. All right.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thanks for having me.
No problem, buddy. You take it easy, and I'll see you on Twitter. And remember, wash your hands. See you later, buddy.
Later.
And that is it for this episode of Indie Choice Picks. Guys, we made it to season 3. I'm excited. I am so stoked to get new creators onto this show. If you are an indie comic book creator or a writer or whatever, as long as it's indie, I want you guys to come onto this show. I am now taking submissions to have guests onto this show, and you guys are all welcome to come in and join me on the show. I think I said show more than once. Anyways, you can find me on Twitter at Heroic Studios, or you can hit me up on Instagram, Will at Heroic Studios. Both of my tags and links to my social media is right there. So please let me know if you guys are interested in coming onto the show. I will see you guys next time with another fun, filled, exciting